My name is Darren Williams. I'm 26 years old, and in 3 days, I was supposed to be walking down the aisle to marry Keisha. The invitations were already printed, the tux was rented, and all our friends had RSVP'd. But here I am, sitting on the floor of my empty apartment in Atlanta, my hands shaking as I type out a message that's going to destroy 3 lives at once. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like you were living someone else's life, because this story will make you rethink everything about authenticity. I've been a front-end developer for 4 years, a career I chose because it seemed safe, stable, predictable. Exactly how I've always been described: the safe boyfriend, the reliable employee, the son-in-law any mother would love to have. Keisha always said I was her safe harbor, her certainty in the middle of a chaotic world. She had no idea I felt like an actor playing a part I never even auditioned for. Our midtown apartment perfectly reflected our life, organized, modern, no surprises. Every morning, I'd wake up at 6:30 to the sound of my alarm, never needing the snooze button. Keisha would already be in the kitchen brewing her special Ethiopian coffee, the sweet aroma filling our space while she watched the morning news on her tablet. I'd have my black coffee, check my emails on my phone, and we'd say goodbye with a quick kiss on the cheek before she left for the marketing firm where she worked. What you're hearing is just the beginning. The full, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check the link in the description right now. My work routine was just as predictable. 2 monitors, clean code, punctual meetings via video conference. I always had lunch at the same time, a healthy sandwich Keisha had made the night before. The afternoons dragged on between debugging and implementing new features, the constant sound of Atlanta traffic serving as the soundtrack to my automated life. When Keisha got home at 6 in the evening, we'd have dinner while watching some series on Netflix. She'd talk about difficult clients, I'd comment on the trickiest bugs of the day. Safe, predictable conversations that never touched on anything too deep. On the weekends, she would organize get-togethers with friends, barbecues at the apartment, or outings to try new restaurants. I went along with everything with a polite smile, being the perfect boyfriend everyone expected me to be. But on the inside, I felt like I was watching my own life from the outside. Like I was a spectator at a play where I was the main character but had never read the script. Keisha deserved someone who loved her with passion, not with the polite kindness I offered. She deserved someone who was excited about wedding plans, not someone who smiled and agreed because it was expected. The proposal happened exactly how she'd always dreamed, in Piedmont Park at sunset, with a hidden photographer and everything. I got down on one knee, said the right words, and she cried with joy. All our friends celebrated. Our families were euphoric. I smiled for all the pictures, but I felt a strange weight in my chest, as if I were signing a contract for a life that didn't belong to me. The wedding preparations intensified this feeling. Keisha was radiant, picking out flowers, tasting cakes, trying on dresses. I agreed with everything, took part in the decisions, but I felt like a ghost, watching someone else's wedding preparations. When she showed me decoration options, I just saw colors and shapes. When we discussed the guest list, I thought about how many people would be there celebrating a lie that even I didn't fully understand. That's when she gave me the news that would change everything forever. "Babe, I have an amazing surprise." Keisha came into the house on a Thursday night with a smile that lit up the whole apartment. "Jerome got special leave and he's coming tomorrow to stay with us until the wedding." Jerome. Her older brother she adored, the soldier who had been serving overseas for almost 2 years. She spoke of him with an admiration I had never seen in her eyes when she looked at me. She told stories about how he always protected her when they were kids, how he was brave, authentic, intense. I only knew Jerome through photos and sporadic video calls, always with a bad connection that distorted his image. "He'll stay in the guest room. It'll be perfect to have my brother here to walk me down the aisle." Keisha was so happy she started rearranging the apartment immediately, getting everything ready for his arrival. That night, while she slept beside me dreaming of their reunion, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Something inside me was restless, a strange feeling I couldn't name. Maybe it was just pre-wedding jitters, I thought. Maybe it was normal to feel this anxiety before such a big step. On Friday afternoon, I left work early to be home when Jerome arrived. Keisha had gone out to get special ingredients for the welcome dinner she had planned. I was organizing some code when I heard the key turn in the lock. "Darren?" The voice was deeper than I remembered from the video calls, with a natural tone of authority that did something strange to my stomach. "In here," I replied, saving the file and getting up from my chair. When Jerome walked into the living room, the world seemed to shift into slow motion. He was bigger than I imagined. He He must have been almost 6'6", with broad shoulders that completely filled the doorframe. The military uniform accentuated his athletic physique, the result of years of rigorous training. But it was his eyes that caught me off guard. Intense, intelligent, with a depth that seemed to see right through people. We finally meet in person. He held out his hand, and when our palms touched, I felt an electric current shoot up my arm. The handshake was firm, lasting a few seconds longer than normal, and his eyes never left mine for a single moment. "Jerome, it's a pleasure." My voice came out huskier than usual. "Keisha is over the moon about you coming. And you? How are you feeling with the wedding getting closer?" The question seemed simple, but there was something in the way he asked it, an intensity in his gaze, that made me feel like he was asking something much deeper. Nervous, but happy. The automatic reply left my mouth, but Jerome tilted his head slightly, as if he could hear the lie behind the words. "Nervous is normal, but you seem, how can I put it, like you're carrying something heavy." He finally let go of my hand, but continued to study me with those piercing eyes. Before I could answer, Keisha arrived with the grocery bags, yelling with joy when she saw her brother. She threw herself into his arms, and I watched their reunion with a strange mix of emotions. There was genuine love between them, a connection I had never experienced with anyone. Keisha was more alive, more herself, in Jerome's presence than I had ever seen her. During dinner, I watched the dynamic between the siblings. Jerome made Keisha laugh in a way I never could. He told stories about the places he had served, always with a touch of humor that disguised the seriousness of the situations he had faced. Keisha bombarded him with questions about everything, and he answered with genuine patience and affection. "What about you, Darren? Keisha told me you work in tech. Must be fascinating to create things from scratch." Jerome turned to me, including me in the conversation in a way that made me feel truly seen. "It's satisfying to solve complex problems, to find elegant solutions for technical challenges." I started to explain my work, and to my surprise, Jerome asked intelligent questions, showing a genuine interest in understanding not just what I did, but how I thought. "It must require a lot of creativity. I imagine you have to think outside the box constantly." His eyes lit up when I explained a particularly complex project I had developed. Keisha smiled, proud. "Darren is brilliant. He always finds a solution for everything." But when Jerome looked at me after her comment, I saw something different in his expression. It wasn't just professional admiration. There was a deeper curiosity, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. That night, after Keisha went to bed, Jerome and I stayed in the living room talking. He had changed out of his uniform into a simple t-shirt and jeans, which somehow made him seem even more imposing. Without the military formality, his presence was more relaxed, but just as magnetic. "Can I ask you a personal question?" Jerome leaned forward in the armchair, resting his elbows on his knees. "Sure." My reply came out faster than I intended. "Are you happy?" The question caught me completely off guard. It wasn't what I was expecting to hear. Of course." "Why do you ask?" I stammered, feeling my face get hot. "I don't know. There's something about you. A sadness in your eyes, even when you smile. Keisha doesn't see it because she loves you and sees what she wants to see. But I've spent years learning to read people. It's a matter of survival in my line of work." I stayed silent, not knowing how to respond. Jerome continued. "Don't get me wrong. You clearly love my sister and she adores you. But sometimes love isn't enough if you're not being true to yourself." His words hit something deep inside me, a place I had kept locked away for so long I had almost forgotten it existed. I felt a sudden urge to cry, to confess that he was right, that I felt lost in my own life. I just sometimes feel like I'm living the life everyone expects me to live, not necessarily the one I would choose. The words came out before I could censor them. Jerome nodded slowly. "I know that feeling. I spent years in the army doing what was expected of me, being the perfect soldier, until I realized I was losing pieces of myself in the process." "And what did you do?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I started making choices based on what I really wanted, not on what others expected. It wasn't easy, and I didn't always make people happy. But for the first time in my life, I felt real." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of his words hanging between us. There was something about Jerome's presence that made me want to be honest, vulnerable in a way I had never been with anyone. "Keisha deserves someone who loves her completely, without reservations," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "And you deserve to be loved for who you really are, not for what you represent," Jerome replied softly. Our eyes met in that moment, and I felt something shift in the air between us. It wasn't just a conversation between brothers-in-law. There was a connection forming, a mutual understanding that both scared and drew me in. On Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of Jerome in the kitchen. Keisha was still asleep. She always took advantage of the weekends to rest. I found Jerome making coffee, wearing only a tank top that showed off his muscular arms and a few military tattoos I hadn't noticed before. "Morning. Hope I didn't wake you." He smiled, and again I felt that strange flutter in my stomach. "No, I'm always up early. Habit." I went over to get a mug, and as I passed him in the narrow kitchen, our bodies brushed against each other briefly. The contact was accidental, but the electricity I felt was undeniable. "Want some help with anything?" I offered, trying to sound casual. "Could you pass the butter? It's right behind you." Jerome pointed to the fridge. As I turned to get the butter, I felt Jerome come up behind me. He was close enough that I could feel his body heat. The smell of his soap mixed with something purely masculine that made my breath catch for a second. "Thanks." He took the butter from my hand, his fingers purposefully brushing against mine. When I turned back, we were face to face, only inches apart. For a moment that felt like an eternity, we just stood there, looking at each other. I could see the small scars on his face, a result of years of military service. I could feel his breath, see the intensity in his dark eyes. There was something happening between us, something I couldn't name, but that was growing with every second. "Darren." Jerome started to say something, but the sound of Keisha moving in the bedroom broke the moment. "Good morning, my loves." Keisha appeared in the kitchen in her pajamas, with messy hair and a sleepy smile. What a treat to wake up to the smell of coffee. The rest of the weekend passed in a haze of unspoken tension. Jerome and I found excuses to be close. He helped me fix the dripping kitchen faucet, our bodies touching as we passed tools to each other. When we watched TV on the couch, I was hyper-aware of his every move, of how his presence filled the space. Keisha was on cloud nine, having the two most important men in her life under the same roof. She planned activities for the three of us, took Jerome to see her favorite spots in Atlanta, and I tagged along as I always did, smiling, participating, but feeling like an imposter. On Monday, Jerome announced he had landed an interview for a job as a security instructor at a private company in Florida. He would leave on Wednesday, returning only on Friday for the wedding on Saturday. "That's perfect." Keisha clapped her hands. "You can sort out your professional life and still get back in time to walk me down the aisle." But when Jerome looked at me as he made the announcement, I saw something different in his eyes. There was an urgency there, as if he also felt that time was running out for something neither of us could put into words. On Tuesday night, our last night together before his trip, Keisha went to bed early because she had an important presentation at work the next morning. Jerome and I stayed out on the balcony, looking at the Atlanta lights spreading out to the horizon. "Are you going to miss this place?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation casual. "I'm going to miss some things." He looked directly at me when he said it, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the city. "Jerome, I started to say something, but I didn't know how to continue." "I know," he replied softly. "Me too." We stood in silence, the weight of the unsaid hanging between us like an approaching storm. I knew I was on the verge of something that would change everything, but I still didn't have the courage to take the next step. The next morning, I said goodbye to Jerome with a formal handshake in front of Keisha, but his eyes told me everything his words couldn't. He would leave for Florida. I would continue with the final wedding preparations, and we would both pretend that nothing had changed between us. But something had changed. I had changed. And in 3 days, when Jerome returned for the wedding, I would have to decide whether to continue living the gentle lie I had built, or finally have the courage to face the truth about who I really was. On Thursday night, Keisha got an unexpected call from work. A crucial presentation for an international client had been scheduled for Friday morning, and she would need to travel to Miami immediately for a meeting that could last the entire weekend. "I can't believe this is happening now." She paced back and forth in the bedroom, throwing clothes into a suitcase. "It's 2 days before our wedding, Darren. It's going to be okay, babe. It's just a meeting." I tried to calm her down, but inside I felt a confusing mix of relief and anxiety. "Jerome gets back tomorrow night. At least you two can finalize the last details together." She stopped packing and looked at me with those worried eyes. "Are you sure everything will be okay?" "Of course. I'll pick Jerome up from the airport and we'll take care of everything," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Keisha left early Friday morning, leaving me alone in the apartment for the first time in months. I spent the day trying to focus on work, but my thoughts kept returning to Jerome. Every time the phone rang, my heart raced thinking it might be him. At 7 in the evening, I drove to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. My hand trembled slightly on the steering wheel as I waited in the arrivals area. When I saw Jerome coming out of the security area, carrying only a military backpack, I felt as if the air had been sucked out of my lungs. He looked different, more relaxed maybe. There was something in his eyes when he saw me, a determination that wasn't there before. We walked toward each other as if in slow motion, and when we hugged in greeting, the embrace lasted longer than it should have. "How was the trip?" I asked as we walked to the car. "Enlightening," he answered, and there was a weight to that word that made me look at him. I got the job, but, more importantly, I had time to think about a lot of things. During the drive home, we talked about trivial things, the traffic, the weather, the final wedding preparations. But there was an electric tension in the air, as if we were both carefully avoiding the subject that really mattered. When we got to the apartment, Keisha's absence was palpable. The space felt different, more intimate, charged with unexplored possibilities. Jerome left his backpack in the guest room and found me in the kitchen, where I was pretending to be busy preparing something for dinner. "Darren." His voice was lower than usual, more intense. "We need to talk." My hand stopped mid-chop. "About what?" "You know what about." He came closer, standing on the other side of the kitchen island. "About what's happening between us." My heart started beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Jerome, for the past 3 days, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about us, about the way you look at me, the way I feel when I'm near you." His words came out slowly, each one heavy with meaning. I dropped the knife and leaned on the counter, needing something solid to support me. "We can't have this conversation. You're Keisha's brother. I'm marrying her in 2 days. Are you marrying her because it's what's expected of you, or because it's what you really want?" Jerome came around the counter, getting closer to me. "I love Keisha." The words came out automatically, but they sounded hollow even to me. "I know you love her, but are you in love with her? Do you feel for her what you're feeling for me right now?" He stopped just inches from me, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I couldn't answer. The words were stuck in my throat, along with years of denial and fear. "Darren, look at me." Jerome placed his hand on my chin, gently forcing me to meet his eyes. "When was the last time you felt truly alive? Truly yourself?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut, because the answer was obvious. I had felt more myself in the last few days, in his presence, than I had in years. "This is crazy," I murmured, but I didn't pull away from his touch. "Maybe. But sometimes, crazy is the only thing that makes sense." His hand slid from my chin to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair. We just stood there, looking at each other, the entire world reduced to the space between our bodies. I could see every detail of his face, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his lips curved slightly, the absolute intensity in his dark eyes. "If you tell me to stop, I'll stop," Jerome whispered, his breath warm against my skin. "If you tell me this is wrong, that you feel nothing, I'll leave right now and we'll never speak of this again." My breathing was ragged, my heart pounding so hard I felt like it would explode. All the words I should have said, that this was wrong, that I loved Keisha, that he should stop, died on my lips. Instead, I heard myself whisper, "Don't stop." It was like a dam had broken inside me. Jerome leaned in, and when our lips touched, I felt like I was waking up from a 26-year-long dream. The kiss was soft at first, almost hesitant, but when I responded, pressing my body against his, something primal and urgent took over. His hands were everywhere, in my hair, on my back, pulling me closer as if he couldn't get enough. I clung to him like a drowning man clings to a life raft, finally understanding what people meant when they talked about passion. "My God, Darren," Jerome murmured against my lips, his voice hoarse with desire. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do this." "Since when?" I asked, barely able to form the words. "Since the moment I saw you. Since the first handshake." He kissed my neck, and I felt my knees go weak. "You have something, a light that's hidden, but I can see it. I could always see it." His words touched me in a place I didn't even know existed. No one had ever seen me that way, had ever looked past the carefully constructed facade I presented to the world. Jerome led me out of the kitchen, through the living room, toward my bedroom. Every step was a conscious choice, a decision to abandon the safety of the known for the uncharted territory of the truth. When we reached the bedroom, he stopped and looked me in the eyes again. "Are you sure? Because after this, there's no going back." In response, I started unbuttoning his shirt, my fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. When the shirt fell to the floor, revealing his muscular torso marked by a few scars that told stories I wanted to know, I felt like I was seeing a real man for the first time in my life. Jerome took off my shirt with a reverence that made me feel like I was something precious, something to be discovered and cherished. When his hands touched my bare skin, I felt an electric current run through my entire body. "You're beautiful," he whispered, tracing imaginary lines on my chest with his fingertips. "Perfect." We moved to the bed as if in a carefully choreographed dance, each movement flowing naturally into the next. Jerome laid me down gently, as if I were made of glass, and then positioned himself over me, propping himself up on his arms so as not to crush me with his weight. "Have you ever—" he started to ask, but I shook my head. "Never. With anyone," I admitted, feeling my face flush. Something shifted in Jerome's expression, a mix of surprise, tenderness, and something that seemed almost protective. "Then let's go slow. Let's do this right." And he did. Jerome touched me like he was reading a book in Braille, learning every curve, every sensitivity, every spot that made me sigh or squirm with pleasure. His hands were large and calloused, but incredibly gentle, awakening sensations I didn't even know my body was capable of feeling. When his mouth followed the path his hands had traced, I felt like I was being taken apart and rebuilt, cell by cell. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered encouragement took me further from who I thought I was and closer to who I could truly be. "Relax," Jerome murmured against my skin when he felt my body tense up. "I'm here. I'm not going to hurt you." And I did relax. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to be completely vulnerable, completely open to another person. Jerome guided me through each new sensation with a patience and care that made me understand this wasn't just about physical desire. It was about connection, about being seen and accepted in my truest form. When we finally joined completely, it felt as if two halves of a whole had finally found each other. It wasn't just physical pleasure, though that was intense beyond anything I could have imagined. It was recognition, acceptance, the feeling of finally being at home in my own body. Jerome moved with a precision that spoke of experience, but also with a tenderness that told me this meant something special to him too. Every move was calculated to give me pleasure, to take me higher, to show me what my body was capable of when finally freed from the shackles of denial. "Look at me," he whispered when I felt like I was about to lose myself completely. "I want to see you. I want to see who you really are." Our eyes met, and in that moment of absolute connection, I felt as if all the masks had finally fallen away. Jerome was seeing me, really seeing me, and he wasn't running away. He was embracing me, accepting me, celebrating me. When the climax finally hit me, it was as if a supernova had exploded inside of me. Every cell in my body vibrated with an intensity I didn't know was possible. And for one glorious moment, there was no past, no future, no consequences, just the perfect, absolute present. Jerome followed moments later, my name escaping his lips like a prayer, and then we collapsed together, breathing heavily, bodies tangled, sweat mingling as we slowly came back to reality. We lay in silence for a long time, Jerome tracing lazy patterns on my back as I processed what had just happened. It wasn't just that I'd had sex with a man for the first time. It was that I had connected with another person in a way I never knew was possible. "How do you feel?" Jerome asked eventually, his voice soft in the darkness. "Different," I answered honestly, "like I've woken up from a very long dream. A good dream or a bad one?" I thought about it for a moment. Neither good nor bad. Just not real. It wasn't me. Jerome pulled me closer, and I felt the safety of his arms around me. "And now? Does this feel real?" "More real than anything I've ever felt," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty. We stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. Jerome told me about his childhood, about how he always knew he was different, about the struggles he faced to accept his sexuality in a military environment. I talked about the feeling of always playing a part, about how disconnected I felt from my own life. "You know this changes everything, don't you?" Jerome said eventually. "I know," I replied, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of that change. I felt relieved. When we finally fell asleep, tangled in each other's arms, I knew I had crossed a line there was no coming back from. Tomorrow I would have to face the consequences, would have to find a way to be honest with Keisha, with myself, and with the world. But in that moment, in Jerome's arms, I felt more myself than I had ever felt. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. I woke up on Saturday morning to the sound of my phone ringing insistently. For a moment, confused between sleep and reality, I thought it was just a nightmare. But when I opened my eyes and saw Jerome beside me, still sleeping peacefully, reality hit me like a high-speed train. It was Keisha calling. "Hi, love." Her voice was excited, full of morning energy. "How are you guys? Did you get everything sorted out for today?" My throat was dry, the words refusing to come out. Jerome opened his eyes at the sound of my tense voice, immediately alert. We're good." "How was the meeting?" I managed to reply, trying to sound normal. "It was amazing. We closed the deal. I'm at the airport now. My flight leaves in 2 hours. I'll be there at 3 this afternoon to get ready. I can't believe in a few hours I'm going to be your wife." Every word she said was like a knife in my chest. Jerome sat up in bed, running a hand through his hair, the reality of the situation weighing on both of us. "Keisha, I started, but she cut me off. "Babe, are you okay? Your voice sounds weird." "I'm just nervous about the wedding." The lie came out automatically, but every word made me feel more disgusting. "That's normal, my love. I'm nervous too. But it's the good kind of nervous, you know? The kind you get when you're about to start the best part of your life." After I hung up, Jerome and I sat on the bed in complete silence. The weight of what we had done, of what it meant, hung between us like a storm cloud. "Darren," Jerome began, but I shook my head. "No, I can't do this to her. I can't get married knowing what I know now about myself." The words came out with a determination that surprised me. "And what are you going to do?" His voice was gentle, but I could hear the concern. "I'm going to tell her the truth, before the wedding. She deserves to know." Jerome took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. I know, but it's the right thing to do." We spent the next few hours in a strange bubble of intimacy and desperation. We had breakfast together, every moment charged with the awareness that everything was about to change. Jerome told me about his decision to take the job in Florida, about how he realized he couldn't live a lie anymore after meeting me. "You changed something in me too," he said, tracing circles on the back of my hand. "You reminded me of who I really am when I'm not trying to be what others expect." At 2:30 in the afternoon, I tidied up the house and got dressed. Jerome stayed in the guest room, giving me space for what I needed to do. When I heard the key in the door, my heart started pounding so hard I thought it would explode. "Hi, my future husband!" Keisha came in beaming, dropping her suitcase on the floor and running to hug me. When she kissed me, I felt like I was betraying not only her, but also Jerome. And most of all, myself. "Where's Jerome?" she asked, looking around. "In his room. Keisha, we need to talk." Something in my voice made her smile falter. "Talk about what?" "Darren, you're scaring me." We sat on the couch, and for a moment that seemed to last an eternity. I couldn't find the words. How do you tell someone you love that you've discovered something fundamental about yourself that makes it impossible to stay together? "Keisha, you know I love you, right?" I started, and I saw the fear grow in her eyes. "Darren, no, don't do this. Not today." Her voice was breaking. "I have to. You deserve the truth." I took a deep breath. "Over the last few days, I've discovered something about myself. Something I think I've always known, but never had the courage to face." Tears started streaming down her face before I had even finished speaking. "I'm not the man you deserve, Keisha. Not in the way you need. I love you, but not in the way a husband should love his wife." "Is it someone else?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's complicated." I couldn't lie to her, but I also couldn't tell her the whole truth all at once. "How long?" "It's not like that. It's not that I've been cheating on you for months or years. It's that I discovered something about who I really am, and I can't pretend to be someone I'm not anymore." Keisha stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "You're leaving me on our wedding day." "I'm setting you free," I replied softly. "I'm setting us both free." She turned to me, her face red with tears and anger. "Don't give me that setting you free crap. You're destroying my life." "I know, and I hate myself for it. But it would be worse if I kept on lying. To you, to myself, to everyone." That's when Jerome appeared in the room. Keisha looked at him, then at me, and I saw the exact moment she understood. "My brother?" Her voice was incredulous, shocked. "My own brother Darren?" Jerome took a step forward. "Keisha! No!" she yelled. "Not you too. The two of you. How could you?" What followed were the 2 hardest hours of my life. Keisha cried, screamed, called me a coward, a liar. She had every right. Jerome tried to explain, to take responsibility, but she didn't want to hear any of it from him. "You're my brother. I trusted you," she screamed at Jerome. "And you," she turned to me. 8 months of my life. 8 months planning a future you knew was a lie. I didn't know, I answered honestly. I really didn't know until… Until what? Until my brother showed up, and you decided to experiment? Her voice was laced with sarcasm and pain. Until I finally understood why I always felt like I was living someone else's life. Eventually the anger gave way to exhaustion. Keisha sat in the armchair, looking at both of us as if we were strangers. I have to cancel everything. The wedding, the party. Explain to 300 people why there's no ceremony. Her voice was empty now. I'll help with everything, I offered. I'll cover all the costs. I'll explain to whoever you want. No, she shook her head. I don't want your help. I don't want to see either of you ever again. Jerome knelt in front of her. Keisha, you're my sister. I love you. This doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything, she replied, not looking at him. You two changed everything. She packed her bags and went to our friend Sarah's house. Before she left, she turned to me one last time. I hope it was worth it, Darren. I hope you'll be very happy together. There was no sarcasm in her voice now, just a deep sadness that broke my heart. After she left, Jerome and I were alone in the apartment, which suddenly felt huge and empty. The silence was deafening. What now? I asked. Now you decide if you want to come with me to Florida, or if you'd rather try to rebuild your life here. I looked around the apartment, at the remnants of the life I had built with Keisha, the pictures of us smiling, the wedding plans scattered on the table, the future I had destroyed in one night. There's nothing for me here now, I replied. Not after what I've done. You didn't do anything wrong, Darren. You were finally honest with yourself. I destroyed the life of the woman I love. You saved her from a life of lies. And you saved yourself, too. We spent the rest of the day packing my things. It was surreal how an entire life could fit into a few boxes. Jerome called some friends in Atlanta, explaining the situation, asking for help to move my belongings. On Monday morning, we loaded everything into the truck Jerome had rented. Before leaving, I walked through the empty apartment one last time. On the kitchen table, I left a letter for Keisha, explaining everything I couldn't say in person, asking for forgiveness, wishing her the happiness she deserved. The drive to Florida took 8 hours. Jerome drove while I processed everything that had happened in the last few days. My entire life had changed in less than a week. I had lost my fiancé, my apartment, my planned life. But for the first time, I felt like I was heading towards something real, something of my own. Do you regret it? Jerome asked when we stopped for gas. I thought about the question for a long time. I regret hurting Keisha. I regret not discovering this about myself before I made promises I couldn't keep. But I don't regret finding you. I don't regret finally knowing who I really am. We arrived in Tampa late in the afternoon. Jerome had rented a small apartment near his new job. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a living room, a simple kitchen. But when we walked in and he showed me the room that would be mine, I felt something I had never felt before. The feeling of being home. That night, lying in the bed we now officially shared, Jerome asked me about my plans. I can work from anywhere, I replied. The company already approved me for remote work. And you? How do you feel about starting a new life here? Scared, he admitted. But for the first time in years, scared in a good way. Like I'm about to find out who I can be when I'm not trying to be what others expect. 6 months later, I'm sitting on the balcony of our apartment in Tampa, watching the sunset over the bay. Jerome is in the kitchen making dinner, humming a song I don't recognize. The sound of his voice makes me smile automatically. My life now is completely different from what it was in Atlanta. I work as a freelancer, I have more freedom, more time to discover who I really am when I'm not trying to be someone's perfect boyfriend. Jerome started his job as a security instructor and loves what he does. We've found a community here, people who accept us for who we are, not for what we represent. Keisha and I haven't spoken since that day. I heard through mutual friends that she canceled the wedding, explained the situation to her family and friends, and eventually started therapy to process everything. Part of me will always carry the guilt for what I did to her, but I've learned that sometimes hurting someone you love is the price of being honest with yourself. Jerome still talks to their mom occasionally, but Keisha refuses to speak to him. It's the price we paid for our choices, and we both know it might take years for her to forgive, if she ever does. But here, in this new life we've built together, I've discovered what it means to live authentically. I've discovered what it's like to wake up every day being genuinely myself, not an edited version created to please other people. I've discovered what it's like to love someone completely, without reservation, without fear of being rejected for who I really am. Dinner's ready, Jerome shouts from the kitchen. and I get up to go meet him. As I walk towards the house, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. A year ago, I was about to marry a wonderful woman, living a life that seemed perfect on paper. Today, I'm in a relationship with her brother, living in a city where no one knows me, building a life based on truth instead of convenience. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried over the pain I caused, days I questioned if I had made the right choice. But every time Jerome looks at me with those eyes that truly see me, every time I wake up next to him knowing I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not, I remember why it was worth it. The authentic life isn't necessarily easier than the safe life, but it's infinitely more real, more alive, more mine. If you've made it this far in the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more narratives about courage, authenticity, and the journey to discovering who we really are. Let me know in the comments. What was the moment in your life that changed everything? What difficult decision did you have to make to be true to yourself? Your stories matter, and I'd love to hear them. What you're hearing is just the beginning. The full, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check the link in the description right now. Sometimes discovering who we are means losing everything we thought we wanted. But in the end, when we find our truth, we realize we haven't lost anything. We've just traded a borrowed life for one that truly belongs to us. See you in the next story, where we'll continue to explore the winding and beautiful paths of self-discovery. Until then, have the courage to be yourselves, even when it means disappointing the expectations of others. Life is too short to be lived for someone else.